Have you ever felt completely exhausted, perhaps on the verge of giving up, with the feeling that your resources, be they physical, emotional, or spiritual, are running out? It's a paralyzing feeling, isn't it? Today we're going to unravel an ancient story that speaks directly to this reality, about how divine provision can emerge in the most arid moments of our existence. This journey will take us to Zarephath, a place where scarcity was not just a word but a harsh routine marked by hunger and despair. You'll discover how a woman, already without hope, found something much greater than mere survival. The relevance of this narrative transcends time, offering light to those seeking purpose and strength. In this video, we will explore the story of the widow of Zarephath, detailing the challenges she faced and the choices that led her to experience an unprecedented divine intervention. Our focus will be on understanding the principles behind this provision, not as a magic formula, but as a path of faith and trust that you can apply in your own life. To truly grasp the magnitude of God's provision for the widow of Zarephath, we first need to transport ourselves to the setting of her time, a period of deep crisis and desolation. What kind of world did she inhabit, and what was the true extent of her misery before hope knocked at her door? Imagine yourself living in a land plagued by a relentless drought, the result of divine judgment on the idolatry of King Ahab and Jezebel, as narrated in 1 Kings 17. There was no rain, and famine spread, consuming everything and everyone. This was the environment in which the widow of Zarephath tried to survive, a scenario of deep uncertainty and constant threat. In this arid context, life was a daily struggle. Food supplies dwindled, and the hope of replenishment was almost non-existent. The concept of divine provision seemed a distant utopia for many, while reality imposed the harsh truth of scarcity. The biblical narrative spares no details of the severity of that time. There are different perspectives on how people dealt with such despair. Some gave up, others sought any alternative. The widow of Zarephath, a Gentile, was on the margins, without the resources or faith structure that perhaps others possessed, making her situation even more precarious and solitary in the face of imminent catastrophe. To understand the depth of her poverty, imagine that her few resources were like the last grains of sand in an hourglass. She had only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug, enough for a single meal for herself and her son, after which they expected to die. Faced with such a desolate situation where life hung by a thread, how could divine provision in times of scarcity even be conceived? It is at this point that the story takes on an outline of mystery and hope, preparing the ground for an encounter that would forever change this woman's destiny. It was in this environment of desolation that Elijah, the prophet, emerged. Fleeing Jezebel's persecution and following a divine command, he arrived at the gates of Zarephath. At first you might think he would seek a place of abundance, but God sent him to a widow, the personification of scarcity, for an encounter that would challenge all human logic. Elijah, seeing the woman gathering sticks, made a peculiar request. "Bring me a little water in a jar that I may drink." And as she was going to get it, he called to her and said, "Bring me, please, a piece of bread in your hand." This request, coming from a stranger, seemed not only inappropriate but almost cruel, given her situation. The widow's response revealed the extent of her despair. "As surely as the Lord your God lives, I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug." She explained that she was gathering sticks to prepare the last meal for herself and her son before they died. And this is where the main method of divine provision manifests. Not through a grand offering, but through seemingly irrational obedience. Elijah challenges her. "Do not fear. Go and do as you have said. But first, make me a small loaf from it and bring it out to me. Then you may make some for yourself and your son." This act of giving what little remained, before thinking of herself, is the core of the narrative. The widow faced a choice: follow the logic of self-preservation, or trust in a promise of provision that seemed absurd. What would be the consequences of her decision, and what does this teach us about the true nature of faith in difficult times? The widow, in a remarkable act of faith, obeyed Elijah's word. She used the last handful of flour and the last drop of oil to prepare bread for the prophet. And as promised, her jar of flour did not run out and her jug of oil did not diminish, according to the word of the Lord. This continuous provision sustained her, her son, and Elijah for many days. This miracle of multiplication, of divine provision in the life of the widow of Zarephath, demonstrates a profound truth. Faith precedes the miracle. Apparent scarcity was overcome by unconditional obedience, showing that sometimes divine intervention awaits a first step of trust, even when all seems lost. However, the widow's life did not become free from afflictions. After some time, her son became seriously ill and died. You can imagine the excruciating pain, the desolation that overwhelmed her. Why would God allow such a tragedy after such provision? It was a test that questioned the very existence of the faith she had demonstrated. With a broken heart, the widow confronted Elijah. "What do you have against me, man of God? Have you come to me to bring my sin to remembrance and to kill my son?" Her pain was so great that she questioned the purpose of the previous provision, feeling that the prophet's presence had in some way attracted the calamity. The death of the widow's son introduced a new layer of mystery to her journey of faith. Material provision alone was not enough. She now faced a pain that went beyond hunger. This event, as painful as it was, paved the way for an even deeper understanding of God's sovereignty and love, revealing that divine provision often manifests in unexpected ways. The story of the widow of Zarephath offers us practical and timeless principles for our lives. First, sacrificial obedience. Giving what appears to be your last resource, when guided by faith, can unlock a provision that transcends human logic. It's not about blindly emptying yourself, but about trusting in guidance even when incomprehensible. Secondly, divine provision does not always prevent pain. The death of the widow's son teaches us that even amidst miracles, human adversities persist. Faith is not a shield against sorrow, but an anchor that holds us firm during the storm. And it is in this dark valley that the resurrection of her son demonstrates an even greater type of provision. This episode of The Widow of Zarephath, Divine Provision in Times of Scarcity, invites us to consider our perspective on scarcity. It may not be only material, but also emotional, spiritual, or temporal. When you feel exhausted and have nothing left to offer, faith teaches us to look beyond the visible, to the invisible sustenance of God. You can apply these lessons by cultivating an attitude of gratitude for small resources and a willingness to obey impulses of faith, even if they seem challenging. Start by acknowledging what you have, no matter how small, and offering it with a grateful heart, trusting that God can multiply and sustain. This is a path that strengthens your resilience. To deepen this connection with divine provision, it's crucial to understand that faith manifests not only in grand acts, but in daily life. But how can we nurture this faith so that it becomes truly unshakable, capable of sustaining us in any circumstance, great or small? To implement these truths, start with small acts of faith and obedience. If you feel short on patience, for example, begin to pray for it and practice kindness in challenging situations, trusting that God will provide the capacity. Provision is not just material, it is also the wisdom and strength to face daily life. Additional resources to strengthen your faith include daily reading of sacred scriptures, participation in inspiring faith communities, and cultivating a gratitude journal. These simple habits can gradually transform your perspective, helping you recognize the divine provision that often goes unnoticed. If this reflection on the widow of Zarephath resonated with you, I invite you to share your own experiences of provision in times of scarcity in the comments. When was a time you felt you had very little, but God intervened in an unexpected way? Your story can inspire many others who are also seeking this transformation. True wealth resides in faith and obedience. May this narrative inspire you to trust that, even in your moments of greatest scarcity, God's provision is more than enough to sustain you and lead you to a life of purpose and unshakable hope.